Hello and welcome to KennyRoy.com. I'm Kenny Roy. This is the lecture for the month of December 2012. It is called Superspacing. Welcome to the site. If this is the first lecture that you've seen, you're in for a treat. It's a good one. I should warn you though that I am the workflow Nazi, I'm called that. So if I come across really super strong, if I come across like I'm obsessed with workflow, it's because I am, and that's for a very good reason. I taught at Animation Mentor. Well, I'm on a leave of absence right now, as of recording this right now. I'm going to be back soon. But anyway, I've had over 7.5 years of teaching experience at Animation Mentor, and for a lot of that time, I actually taught 2 classes at the same time. So I've had somewhere around 500 students that have come in and out of my classroom. And in all of that time, I started realizing that the students that really dedicated themselves to workflow were the ones who did the best. And not only that, I found that really early on it was almost impossible to teach except from a standpoint of workflow. Meaning I had what I thought was a pretty good way of getting some pretty good animation. And when I began teaching that, like you get so frustrated because you can't even find the words to describe like how you even made a decision or how you came across, you know, this little piece of information or anything like that. I realized after a long struggle that it all came down to having a starting point, having a set process for how you attack a shot and working on that process. Just changing little things that give you a boost in the output, so your speed, a boost in your quality, make things maybe just a little bit easier, maybe even just a little bit more enjoyable. Maybe a part of your process that you add to your workflow is just something that makes it so that you smile more every day. It could be that simple, right? Maybe it's take a walk. After you thumbnail your shot and you've been collecting reference and doing a lot of work, maybe part of your workflow, and this is totally legit, by the way. You might think to yourself like this is not animation. No, this is legit, all right? Maybe you just take a 10-minute walk and then you come back and you might find your animation gets kicked up like 2 notches just because you start taking walks. It's that easy to make adjustments and to dedicate yourself to a workflow. So anyway, this started out as the disclaimer for why I'm such an intense proponent of workflow. Hopefully that little pitch I just did sold you if you're not sold already. I seem to be pitching workflow every single video that I do. Let me take my shoes off. I shouldn't be standing in my shoes. So this is called Superspacing, and I'm liking coming up with the more creative titles these days, like double your speed, double your fun. That kind of thing. It also gives the members, it gives you guys something to kind of get excited about when you see the title, because if it's just like, you know, overlap, not as much fun, right? So why are we talking about spacing? Why are we doing this lecture this way? I've heard spacing talked about in a lot of different ways, and the reason we've chosen this one for today's lecture is because when you talk about spacing, you should be talking basically about workflow. And I know some of you, especially the people who've been on the site for a long time, are going, all right, here we go. How does this have to do with workflow, Kenny? Come on, let's hear it. Yeah, I'll change your mind. If you're rolling your eyes, I know you're going to be surprised how I loop this back into workflow. But the impetus, the real push to do this lecture this month was because I got a few Ask Video Mail questions from members who basically said they used spacing like a weird way in their sentence. And it dawned on me that people are not thinking of this as a workflow issue. They're thinking of this as just another fundamental that has a sort of like an indirect impact, or sort of a, should we say, like a tangential kind of like thought process to what they're doing, and is not directly involved, when it really is. It always is. It doesn't matter what your workflow is, it actually really is. The sentences I'm talking about that were really weird were something like along the lines of I've hit a roadblock on this shot. I can't tell if I should time it or space it better. Something like that. Another one was I was following along with your overlap lecture, and I can't I can't get the spacing correct on the overlap. And once I get the spacing correct, I can't get the timing correct. And that really confused me as well. So don't worry, I wrote those people back, and I told them, wait for the lecture. I'm going to talk a lot about spacing, and we'll get this all sorted out. So they don't have to worry. Okay. So where to start? Basically, I want to sort of define it, and in defining it, it's not to define it to nail it down. It's to define it in a way that kind of like opens it up, okay? And if you're one of those people that sent that question in, or you're having what you think is spacing issues, maybe this will be the first thing that will be like an aha kind of moment, all right? So animation is, at its core, motion, right? It's the illusion of motion. We flicker 24 frames or 30 frames if you're working in TV per second in front of you. And because your eye blends it together, it looks like it moves. So at its core, animation is motion. And how do we describe motion? We describe it as a object that has a position at a certain time. All right? A position at a certain time. And then motion, as time changes, the position changes. They both change. Okay? You can't have one without the other. All right. That is also, at its core, how timing and spacing relate to each other in animation. Okay? So let me explain how and why that is the case. When you are putting a keyframe in your scene, you're normally posing your character on a certain frame. Okay? And what that is that's you saying, it's you determining, this is the position I want at this time. At a later time, when time changes, and don't think about it actually as later or earlier, just say, as time changes, position changes, backwards or forwards. All right, so just imagine we're in a universe that time goes backwards and forwards, which I've been told, I don't understand how this is possible, but I've been told that's our universe. But anyway, that can be next month's lecture. Okay? So, as time changes, position changes. Okay? So, if you have two gears that are connected like this, right? And I know you've all been to like a science museum where they have gears set up or anything, or maybe you played with Legos or Meccano or any kind of toy that has this kind of relationship, right? If two gears are connected, you move one and you move the other. Any change to this one is going to change this gear, right? And it's almost like a two-way relationship. In Maya, we don't really get two-way relationships. Not really. You can connect two things to one thing, and you can control two things with one thing, like a controller with like an added attribute, connected to an attribute of two objects. But it's not as if you can really get, like if you grab this thing and move it, it will move this thing the opposite way, and if you grab this thing and move it, it'll move this thing, the other one, the opposite way. You don't really get that kind of control in Maya. So we don't like kind of like naturally assume or think about it in this way. But it's important to start thinking about it in this way if you're going to improve the way that you create motion through applying workflow to spacing, okay? It's going to be very important. So start thinking about it in terms of anytime I make an adjustment to time, I am making an adjustment to position. And anytime I make an adjustment to position, I'm making an adjustment to time, right? There are two cogs that are connected. And here's kind of why that is the case and why normally people understand, animators understand, okay, well, I totally know what timing is. I do timing all the time. I kind of know how to time something, but I don't know how to space something. For some reason, that disconnection occurs. And I shouldn't say for some reason. I believe, and this is what this lecture is about, I believe that disconnection occurs because we don't think of ourselves constantly as animators making an adjustment right here, and then this wheel is turning, right? And then making an adjustment here, and this wheel turns, all right? We don't think of ourselves as moving and adjusting both wheels. We kind of only consider ourselves working in terms of timing and not spacing, okay? So hopefully this will change that. So the way you start thinking about it is this. When you are doing pose to pose, you are generally creating motion, and by that I mean, remember, showing a change in time and a change in position, forwards or backwards, whatever it is. But when you are working in pose to pose, you are in general creating motion, showing that change for both of those, using timing as your kind of like pivot point. Okay? So you create a pose, and you know that's the pose you want. You know that's the, let's change the word, you know that that's the position that you want. You want it to go through whatever, like this area of the screen. You know you want it to go, let's say you're tracking an arc, you want it to go like right here because that's a nice arc. You know you want the character to be right here. Why? Because there's a doorway and they have to go through the door. Okay? You are using timing as your pivot point. So you are nailing down that position, and the thing you are going to use to make the final determination of the change in time and the change in position is going to be the timing. So you're going to say, oh no, he comes through too quickly, or it zooms, this is a nice arc. I mean, it looks good, but it zooms to this position. So I'm going to change, I'm going to add some frames. I'm going to retime it. So no, because the beginning of like 90% of workflows I know about are pose to pose, that means you have way more practice in pivoting on time, on changes in time or timing, okay? And that's why I think that people don't realize that they're actually doing a lot of spacing later on, which is when we'll get into workflow. So we'll get there in just a second, okay? So be patient. So, and I've also said, this is something I've said a lot to my students at Animation Mentor. I've also said it in the Staying Motivated article series. There's a 3-part article series in the articles. Check it out if you haven't already. Please read the articles. I put a lot of effort into the articles, and I try to write things that I think, would make great lectures if only they were over an hour long. But there's a lot of good information there, so please check out the articles. I think the link's like down there or something. Okay. But the point I make is that in the Staying Motivated article series is how when you have a small shot to work on, you get a lot of great practice. And over and above, it's 10 times better to do 10 100 frame shots than it is to do one 1,000 frame shot. They are not the same. Doing 10 100 frame shots is so advantageous because you'll go all the way through your workflow. You'll plan it, you'll get some reference, you'll thumbnail it, you'll lay it out, you'll block it, blocking plus, add splines, breakdowns, in-betweens, add the polish pass, final 5%, and done. But on that 1,000 frame shot, you will be doing 90% of your work on the beginning of your workflow, and you won't get to the end. The end of your workflow is so rough. It is. Even for me, the end of my workflow is way rougher than the beginning of my workflow. When I start I could start a shot in my sleep, as I'm sure many of you could, right? How many shots have we started in our lives? But finishing a shot, there's a lot of interesting things that still pop up even for me, while I'm working, oh man, I should try that next time. What was that? That's weird, Just the other day, there was a shot that came back with a note, and I had to bang out this note in an hour, and I was so freaked out. Turns out, what I ended up doing was I kind of took a note took a page out of my own book in the new animation ideas lecture that I showed you guys, where I animated the character moving, and then I added a sign, a nonlinear deformer, a sine wave deformer to the entire thing, and it totally hit the note. It was exactly what they were looking for. Basically, the character needed to look like he kind of slithered a little bit at the end. So rather than figure out how I'm going to make this rig, which was not behaving and was not meant to have that kind of fine, I would say Y rotation or lateral rotation control in it to behave, I got it to do exactly that just by adding that deformer on the geometry after the animation was done. So he goes forward, and then right at the end, I turn on that sine wave, and his tail goes like that. It's really cool. Is that cheating? Yeah, maybe. But it's got to get done, right? So I'm totally going to think about my shots beforehand now. Maybe I can plan on that. Maybe if it looks like a shot is going to need something like that, I can plan on it and not have to wrestle a rig that wasn't made to do that. I can get a lot of really cool things out of a rig now if I just add these deformers. Anyway, I'm very excited about trying that out. So the point is, the overall grand point I'm making is that you guys probably are not afraid of the word timing, but I hear a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty about the concept of spacing, and there's no need for it because you are doing it, okay? As you go on in your animation, so as you go on in that shot I was talking about where you're using timing in a pose-to-pose workflow, in a pose-to-pose moment, you are using timing basically to make your decisions, to finalize your decisions, right? Because you know the position, then you just have to work the timing, right? You just have to figure out, like, does it get here sooner or later? I know it, I want it here, but when does it arrive, okay? As you move on in that animation, or as you use a very physical workflow, like on a shot that has a lot of physical moments in it, you are actually switching to pivoting on the position, pivoting on the spacing. All right. Okay. Here's why. If you're animating something straight ahead, you know, like I do this if I have a very physical action, like for instance, like a baseball throw, and I'll show you really quickly how I would do this. Okay, in just a sec. If I'm animating a baseball throw, I'm probably going to get the character into pose, and then maybe do one kind of like pose to pose kind of transition for that big anticipation before they're about to throw, right? But then, you know, all the way through, I'm probably just going to roll forward 2 frames and just pose that completely out, on 2s. But here's the thing, I know that I'm doing it on 2s, right? So I know that the position in time, I know that moment is locked down. I'm making it look good. I'm determining that relationship between position and time by adjusting the position. Okay? All of a sudden, and in pose to pose, it's timing. In straight ahead, it's basically spacing. And now there's a lot of moments when in your animation you switch to, especially when you're adding a breakdown or defining arcs or whatever, you switch to spacing, and we don't realize it. Okay, and the best way to improve workflow is to realize everything. Okay, is to realize everything, and the best way to realize it is to practice pointing it out to yourself. So a good thing to maybe do is, I used to have, where's the other one? I think my son, hold on a sec. Sometimes Liam comes to the office, so I have a bag of toys. I think the other one, so I have a red one. This is just a one-up mushroom, obviously from Super Mario Brothers. Actually, the green is the 3-up, right? The red is the 1-up. I can't remember. So I have a red and a green one of these. You know what would be fun is while you're working, so here's my guy, right? Here I have a little, what do you call this? Question block? Coin block? Whatever you call this, right? So I could have this on my desk, right? And just, while I'm working and I know that I'm timing things. I'm timing. I just put this up here and work. And then as I go forward in my shot and I'm starting to do spacing, I could take this one down and put the red one up here, right? And just how long did that take? It takes 5 seconds. But realizing what method you're actually using to create the motion, to create that relationship between a change in time and a change in position, right? To point it out to yourself like this, takes 1 second. Just put it up there. Now I'm doing some spacing for 10 minutes, whatever. And now I'm moving on to a new section. And so I'm going to pose this out. Oh, I guess and then just put this one up here. Oh, I guess I'm timing things now. I'm going to create a couple poses. I'm going to just move them around on the timeline, just see what looks good. And we do this, you do this, with especially if you have a step key workflow in the beginning with pose to pose. It's so easy to just retime stuff. And you watch it back and watch it back and watch it back, and it looks like, oh, it went too quickly, you're just moving around on the timeline, you watch and whatever. And then you switch to, once you start making those fine-tune adjustments to the arcs, and once you start really like working that slow in on 2s and 1s, then you know what I'm doing? I'm spacing right now, and you change it. That would really give a kick in the butt to your workflow. It really would. Okay, so hopefully by now, I know I've been rambling for a little while. We're gonna jump into Maya just in 1 second here. Hopefully by now you're starting to think to yourself that the kind of questions that you've had about timing and spacing can really actually be all ironed out in terms of what you need to happen, what you need to occur in that moment. So if someone is asking me, like that one question, which was about overlap and spacing, okay, then what you can change your question to, or what your question should change for you into and inform you, like, okay, is this really my issue, or is this not my issue? Is it something else, right? The new question is, I know that my overlap should be 4 frames long, or whatever. I just determined this, but it looks too big when I do it when it's 4 frames. I'm making it look too big. I'm overlapping too much, meaning the position is changing. The position is way off. I don't know what that position should be for 4 frames of overlap, or something like that, right? Let's say it's like someone like landing and they're spine bending or whatever, right? Well, that's an entirely different question than I'm having trouble with like spacing my overlap, isn't it? Because is the problem really that you're doing the overlap too big? Well, it kind of seems like not, because then you would just reduce the amount of overlap. It seems like it's actually you're having a little bit of a timing issue and not a spacing issue. See how we just did that? See, we just kind of changed the question, right? But you can only do that once you know that these things are 2 gears, that if you have one set and you're adjusting the other one, then you are still turning the gears in the entire machine that is motion, okay? Putting on display a change of time and a change of position, okay? Motion. I'll get a sip of water. I'm going to get a sip of water. Hold on. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to remind you of a few things that happened in some lectures, and show you basically when I'm working, when that determination of am I really using timing or am I using spacing would dawn on me. That real determination of what mode am I in, would happen for me. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the layout of the cartoony animation scene that I have. And if you have the intermediate cartoony lecture, you can open this up right now for yourself and follow along if you want. I'll make it pretty easy to follow along here, but you can just watch and pay specific attention to workflow, how I'm doing it, and how I'm making the judgment calls. Okay. Don't pay as much attention to what's on screen. All right. You're never going to get as far as you can go if you're so concerned with what's on screen. You need to be concerned with what you are doing. What am I doing right now? All right. The results will speak for themselves, won't they? Okay. So let's take a look. So here we have the infamous intermediate cartoony scene, and here's Groggy, good old Grog, and basically it's a step key scene, and there it is. This is all basically laid out. You could call this very early blocking. Everything is on step keys, and looking, I don't know, like it did. So basically, let's just take a quick look. I'm just going to select all its controls, and we're just going to take a look at the graph editor, and so here it is. And you know, you've all seen this. You all have animation that looks like this, and I just want to point out that while I'm working on this, that if I do something like this, if I just select some keys and go like that, that is me retiming. Okay, that's adjusting timing, right? Because I'm not making any change to the value of the key, just the time of the key. So an easy way, I mean, this might be a little simplistic and it might not actually benefit your workflow, but another easy way to determine if you are timing or you are spacing is if the keys are moving left to right, you are timing. If they're moving up and down, then you are spacing, like no matter what, right? And so even adjusting the little values, even just making tiny, tiny, tiny little adjustments is technically spacing, because you need to know how, you know, you have a determination for what time you want that to occur on. You're just making an adjustment to the position, okay? So why I'm calling this lecture super spacing is because I want you to be aware that you're also spacing within a pose as you are adjusting anything. Really, all posing is kind of spacing as well. And for some, that might be a revelation. In fact, you know, take a second to realize that right now. Even though when you're working in pose to pose, you feel like the character is, I don't know, kind of like blank and kind of a mannequin, and you don't really have anything until you have that pose, and then you have something to work with. Really, you're actually spacing the character, and then once you have that space that you like, you're determining the time, and that's why I'm saying when you're doing pose to pose, you're pivoting on the time. But just realize that even the smallest adjustment, if you have this motion like this, and you know that arc is flat, even just like pulling that out here, you actually just spaced it, okay? Because you didn't make an adjustment to time to make it look better, you made an adjustment to the position, okay? So that's what we're going to do right now. So I can do just a pretty simple thing here. So let's say, in my workflow, which is part of my workflow, is I would probably add a breakdown, you know, somewhere in this area, right? So, you know, something halfway between here. Let me just make sure that my my keys are set as stepped out. No, they weren't. Good. Now they are. So sort of halfway between this and this. You know, something. Just get them starting to lean over. Does someone have translation on it? No. And these legs are, looks like they're turning. So this one's sliding on the ground, and this one's coming forward. Like that. And the arms need to stay up, because even though they're coming down, they still need to have a nice movement here. All right, so I'm going to say though that what I have right here, this is no good. This is basically making it really, really even. So I'm going to retime this. Okay, I'm going to time that to be a lot later. So it's almost like he's leaning forward and almost comes to this moment where he pops off the ground. In fact, it could be even closer together in time. Okay, and now he doesn't hang in the air long enough. This feels like he's splatted on the ground for like 10 frames. So I'm going to retime this because I really want him to pop up in the air and then splat and kind of hang. And this gives much more the impression that he's hanging in the air. Okay. So when you determined, like, you know, I like this pose. This is a great example. Look at this pose. He's like popping up in the air, right? I knew that he had to pop up in the air, so I put him there. But like how long after he looks at this spider does he pop up in the air? That was a determination made way later. I made this pose and then I moved it to this frame. And now let me see. I think it's too soon. I think you should be in the air much later. Hold on a second. Just make sure I selected everything. Okay. Two frames later. So he's standing, looks, what? Could be even later. Changing this whole shot. Yeah, that's better. Huh? What? Yeah, and see, I mean, hopefully, so remember what this looked like before. Just remember that evenness and how there was a key like right here, and it looked like he was splatted on the ground for a really long time. I worked that out later just because my workflow is to kind of get breakdowns a little bit more even and then kind of, retime them as I see fit, okay? And then, but remember what this looked like with that evenness, and then how now that I've retimed this even in stepped mode looks a lot closer to the final shot than the blocking did before, because he really kind of like splats and pops in the air, especially with that kind of plateaued arc, okay? But if you'll notice, I know you're noticing this, if you notice, even when you're creating your pose, you're technically spacing, but you're making, but you know where that pose is supposed to be. You know what you are searching for. There are parameters you're trying to satisfy. And then the timing is the question mark. It's like, what do I do with this in time? Do I move it forward or backwards in time to make it fit with good animation, right? So that's when you know your timing. But technically, you're doing spacing when you're making that pose, right? So that's why I'm saying, even if you're timing your shot, you're working that cog, you're turning that wheel. It's well, that'd be the wrong way. It's turning the other wheel at the same time. Man, that took a lot. I wonder if I can like hop on one foot and do. Okay, good, cool. So coordinated. You see that? Okay. I was waiting for the answer. Okay, so let's move forward. Let's take a look at the scene much later. And I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to save it. So here we have the version of the shot where I started working on the arc of his chest when he starts coming up and rearing up in the air. And if you'll notice, this editable motion trail on his chest, see that? Moving around. That editable motion trail kind of betrays, how messy really the spacing is on this, okay? So this is every, let's see, 3 frames right now. This is on 3s. And by the way, I don't really, when I'm working, I really don't care if it's on 2s or 3s or 1s or anything, just as long as, it looks good. Which is also another thing to consider. Think about this. If you do a pose and you make a breakdown. Now, I tried to make a breakdown that was basically halfway between him running like this and running like this, right? So my thought was, okay, halfway. And then if I make it halfway, but I bias it in timing, that will be my way of kind of, making a slow in or a slow out. But what if you make a pose that's not actually halfway, okay? You make a pose on the timeline halfway, but what if it's not actually the linear, like perfect halfway point between two poses? You have a choice. You can either adjust it until it is, or that needs to be retimed so that it's on the appropriate frame. Maybe you have too much bias towards your A pose and not enough towards your B pose, right? So if it's really biased towards A and you have made that pose, halfway on the timeline between A and B, then it just is logic that you need to retime it, push it more towards A for it to look like what it's supposed to be. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is if once you start doing things like defining arcs and doing slow in and slow out, especially, and maybe that's the whole point of this lecture called superspacing, is that and you are totally aware of how you are actually spacing everything when you are making pose choices, even on breakdowns and in-betweens, okay? So let's take a look at an example right here. So we have our chest, basically, and my note for myself was that I wanted to be a slow in to this apex moment, okay? So he goes, I want him to kind of come down and slow into this area up here, and for it to be very, 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 very smooth, okay? So now he's up around here, and so what I can do is I can just roll forward, and knowing that the spacing I want is a general slow in, so I got to get a little bit of speed so that slow in will be nice and dramatic. All right. And I want it to be nice and smooth. I got to make sure that I'm not straying too far over. I want that move how I want it to. Yeah, there we go. 798. See, now I'm moving the keyframes. This is why I love editable motion trail. I talked about it, not at length, but I went through it in New Animation Ideas. The lecture, and man, I just really think it's the bee's knees. You gotta check it out if you haven't already. See, I don't have to change what frame Maya is on in order to make the changes to these keyframes. How awesome is that? You can just use left and right key. All right, so it's at its fastest about right here, and then we're starting the nice slow in. Now, if you don't have a keyframe, then it will go to the next frame on the, so this is 98, here's 101, that's no good. So we actually have to change the keyframe here. What's going on? Oh, there we go. All right, so we're getting our slow in. All right, just trying to figure out, and what's funny is, this is totally fine. There's really no reason for me to not, do a little bit of smoothing, while I'm here. I mean, why not, right? We can bias this just even a little bit more, okay? Now I don't even have to, I can move him completely out of the way, and I can actually just space this exactly how I want it. Why does it do that? It doesn't seem like object. Oh, that's funny. X, Y, and Z. Oh, that's really interesting. I wonder why that is. Learn something new every day. Anyway, so I'm just going to make these little adjustments right here so that it slows in. And now, and from this view, I just got to animate to camera, don't forget. Something like that. Okay, and this that you know, further adjustment necessary, of course, but here we go. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Watch the chest now as the animation goes by. He hits the ground right here and he comes up, and just look at this nice, like just beautiful slow in this moment. Oh, it's so good. Let me show you with something that's a little bit easier to see. But even though I'm going to do this, don't be fooled. The skill of seeing the spacing in your objects. Just going to parent it, okay, and then I'm going to just make a new underlay so you can see. Boink! Look at that. You see that moment? Boink! It lands, and then just that little like wistful. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say. It like kind of like. Almost like looks like it swings on a rope or like a bungee cord. It's great. Bounces and then like that nice little slow in right there. Watch one more time. Boink. Okay. Now of course the rest of what happens in the pose doesn't make sense when you're looking at just a ball, does it? No. So that was just a little visual aid for us to see what's going on in the chest here. But that was all spacing. I was moving forward one frame at a time. I was using my knowledge. I was using what I know about what I'm trying to achieve in this moment. Here, let me just keep on playing it so you can see. I was using what I know about how the animation needs to, you know, how he needs to exit the scene. I was using what I know about how he needs to basically anticipate and you know, and how much time of the anticipation is supposed to be. It's like a 10 or 12 frame anticipation on that really, really fast zip out, right? So having those timing choices locked in essentially makes it so that I can just space it, just completely go into spacing mode to make those decisions. And so, you know, I just know for a fact that many of you might not be thinking to yourself when you go into polish and you're doing, you know, doing work very meticulously on ones and twos, that you're almost doing primarily in, you know, spacing and that's it. But you are, okay? Don't be scared of spacing. Don't be scared of the term. Don't be scared of the work itself. It's actually, you know, you're doing a lot more of it than you think. Okay, so let me show you one more example of spacing within the pose, and let's see here. So this is what I would call basically a way to determine if you are thinking, if your workflow is designed yet for thinking about spacing and timing in their correct relationship. All right. If you're just starting out, it's very, very easy to get the two terms confused. And there's a lot of questions on like on Animation Mentor as well, not just my site, about like fundamentally, what is the difference between timing and spacing? There's not a difference between them. They are connected wheels in the machine that you use to create motion. because motion is at its definition, motion is a change in position over a change in time. It's that simple. How can you change one without the other? How could you? You can't. Then you don't have motion. If time changes and an object position doesn't change, it's not moving, right? And I'm not sure if you could say that an object's position is changing, but time is not going by. I don't understand how that would work. So that's very parallel universe kind of stuff that I don't even understand. I say it and then my brain starts hurting. Okay, so let's just pretend I'm basically doing a let's see here, doing a baseball throw. Okay, I'm just going to have him holding this ball. Okay, and now what am I in? Am I in FK right now? Stand by. I'm going to do IK. Okay. Now so what we all do is we come up with poses and whatever, and we get our our start pose, and we get all our stuff going. So I'm going to do that really quickly, and this is going to be, basically for a baseball throw, but I'm going to just kind of like skip the part where the guy does his long anticipation and kind of just go to, where we would be if he's just about to throw, okay? So just give me a second while I do this. I really like Morpheus's controls. I really like how by default, like the elbow follow, the pole vector follows the elbow and stuff. I normally set that up, and it's nice that it just works with him. I really like that. What is this? Is this FK spine? IK spine? Whatever, doesn't matter, either way. I tried to say I made him, I made him look like a baseball pitcher. Hope you appreciate that. I gave him a big mustache, and a soul patch, and a big chin. All right. Okay, so we got our start position. Now, in terms of timing and spacing, obviously we are determining a start pose, and a start pose kind of like doesn't really have anything to do with timing or spacing. It's just, you need a start position for everything. Man, we're getting really metaphysical this lecture, aren't we? Okay. So I just want to point out, okay, so as we make our throwing pose, what should we be thinking about? Should we be thinking about how he is basically, coming down on this foot, whipping this ball around, taking a step forward? Is the distance that he steps the most important? Or can we think about everything in terms of spacing? All right. So this is basically at its core the workflow adjustment, the workflow change that I want you to all try. Okay. Now, it helps if you have something that that you can draw on your screen, like annotate. There's a tool called Blue Pencil. I'm not sure if mine is installed. I just reinstalled Maya. Stand by. Might not have it. No. Okay. So rather than make you watch me install it, so when you're making your pose change, okay, let's see if we can't make some pretty interesting spacing decisions. Right up by the ear. I don't know much about baseball, but I know that they try to keep that ball up if they can. Let's get that out of his body. Probably should raise the shoulder and start dropping this one. Okay, and now another pose. I'm just going on. I'm going on 5s right now. Now this is the big one. Okay, so what I want to test, what I want to see is if my ball is moving super quickly. Can I get extra kind of spacing out of my body to enhance that, to kind of make that effect greater, and is that going to screw up the animation and make it so that it's almost impossible to time? Okay, so let's see. Let's see here. Trying to get him to lead with his elbow, but not like lose a lot of speed either. It's got to come back. And he's got to stay on balance. That's for sure. Okay. And here's the kicker. While I'm looking at pose change, I also need to start thinking about how is that ball coming out of his hands, okay? And if the way that the ball starts moving is at this point early on in my shot, if it starts coming off wrong, it's always going to look a little bit weird. I always say that, you know, the worst part of your blocking is what comes out, you know, comes through the strongest. Unfortunately, it's kind of sad. Okay, but for some reason we can't get away from bad or you know kind of, you know, sloppy choices early on in the animation. Some reason we just can't get away from it. I'm trying to get him to lead with this elbow, but it's just turning out weird. We'll get something going. Don't worry about it. All right. And so to answer that question, I'm going to basically time this very evenly, but I'm going to use the spacing of the ball to make my spacing decisions on the body itself, okay? So here's what I mean. I have it timed very evenly right now. Now what I want to do is I want to, I know that, 2 frames later, I want this ball to be looking like, let's say 4 frames, I want it to be looking like it was like hucked at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So I'm going to use the ball, I'm going to space the ball and let that dictate my pose choice for the, or another way to say it, my spacing for the body. Okay? Okay, that's not far enough. That's good. Let's see, let's push it. Remember I always say, always go too far rather than not far enough. Okay? Let me save it at this point. I'll give you this MIA file so you can check it out yourself. You have to download Morpheus. Morpheus is free. Go to joshburton.com. Okay? Anyway, so taking a look here, what do we have? We have animation. It goes by, and it looks pretty even, except I'm making a choice at how far and fast I want that ball to go. All right? Let's go a little bit further. And remember, I always say animation is like fishing. You have to go too far. There's no choice but to go too far. Okay? If you don't, guess what? You'll never get the fish. You have to cast your line over where the fish are and then reel it in. All right? So I think this looks okay. Let's go a little bit further. Further and further still. Okay. I think it's a little too far. All right, so I'm glad I went that far. I think it's back now. I just did undo. Okay. And now it'll obviously be twice this far by this point. All right, or even further. But the hand's not going to be attached to it by then, so it doesn't matter. Okay. But what I will do, just so I don't lose this position, is I'm going to create a locator, and I'm just going to snap the locator to that position. All right. Okay. I'm also going to make another locator just right here. Okay. So it's just so I have 2 locators that show where my choices are, right? So because I don't want to lose those, because I'm going to be doing a little work with that constraint, and I don't want things to get wacky. Okay. So now that we know that this is the correct spacing for the ball, let's actually go back and space the rest of the throw and let that determine my pose choice for the body. Okay? So here's the hand at this point. Here's the hand or the ball, sorry, at this point. Halfway would be like somewhere right here. Let's go ahead and do that. All right? And let that work its way back. Okay? Let's make this pose. Oops, why is that doing that? Oh, I know why. It's working within the parent is the shoulder space. All right, that's not a big deal. I can fix this. Not a big deal. Not a big deal at all, actually. I just need to make a few more controllers. Or locators, rather. I could always bake it, but I don't want to. So we've got to go world, and now on these keyframes, stand by. I'm going to delete this. Okay. 5. Where is that? Oh, there we go. That's funny. I was just trying to snap it to itself. That's funny. Oof. God, it keeps trying to snap to its own geometry. All right, there's the locator right here. I'm just gonna boop. Oh, there we go. Yay. Okay. 12, 14, 18. All right. Anyway, so 12. So this is halfway between its position up by his ear and there. So let's have all of that energy that we've determined we want in the pose. Let's actually push that backwards into the body and space the body that way. Okay? Now we're getting into super spacing. Now we're cooking with gas. Oh yeah. Little trick, I selected the hand and I know that there's a key on the hand on every frame that I want a key on the body, so I'm just going to hit S, period, S, period, S, so that the body now, if I select any of the controllers in the body, they have keys on the right frame, right? So just a good way to get your kind of, it's almost like a poor man's character sets. All right, so let's have him really pivoting over this foot. Probably turn the other way already. This little shaper. I love this little shaper. I don't use this rig often enough. I should have like a official KennyRoy.com rig. What do you think? Something like that. This foot does not need to roll anymore. But it should have kicked off. I like this hand swinging back, but I don't like it swinging back too fast. Otherwise, if it swings backwards while this goes forwards, the net effect is reduced because you have way too much competing forces. Now let's start going crazy. You see how his arm is out like that? No reason at all why we can't start getting a little bit kooky with our body. Like I'm okay with it stretching out a little bit to meet that hand. All right. Now on 14, so let's copy that hand. Let's copy the pose on everything except the hand. Okay. Okay. Now that ball does not need to be on this frame. It doesn't need to be apparent to that. So I just turn that off. And this can start coming back to reality. It stretches hilariously. And I really do want to stretch it as well. Start getting that arc, or continue that arc. He's definitely going to have to take a big step here. So let's bring this up. Probably rotate this and a little bit of roll. Why not, right? Not too much. That's too much. And because I don't know how far I've translated this away from, where it's going to be, I'm just going to zero it and then kind of bring it back as well. So it's kind of reeling in just a little bit. This is probably going to this is probably going to land somewhere like around here. All right. I wish I could get a nicer bend in. Is this? Oh, yeah, cool. Oh, I'm going to use that. So here we go. So I gotta stretch this so I get a little bit of bend in here. Oh man, I'm having a lot of fun with this stretch control. Okay. Let's grab everything again. Except this ball. Just copy it. Okay, and then I'd say like on 16. I don't think he needs to wait until 18, actually, this guy. Notice I know it's subtle, but I just said, okay, I want him on 16. I want him on 16, meaning I just made a timing choice. The timing is locked down, right? The time is totally locked down. I know it's on 16, meaning what am I doing right now? I'm spacing. And I know the difference is subtle, but there is a difference, isn't there? Get this nice and, you know, wrapping around his body, his hand too. Okay. Okay. Very, very, very simple. So let's recap. Let's recap here. There is a inextricable connection between timing and spacing. And a lot of what you are doing is timing, because that rears its head a lot more as what you need to adjust while you're working in the beginning of your workflow. Because you've chosen poses. You have your thumbnails, you have your reference, your poses are basically, you know, etched in stone, and you're adjusting the position and you're building your poses in. But then it's the timing that you're pivoting on. You're making a lot of changes there in the beginning. As you move on, we saw in the intermediate cartoony shot that you change over to your knowledge of spacing once the timing is nailed down, and it makes total sense. As you're working on your animated scene, the timing is less and less and less and less and less a issue. You have, just by virtue of the fact that you're adding keyframes and there's less empty frames, to add keys, the only thing you can adjust is the spacing, okay? So in terms of workflow, start thinking about this concept in terms of the beginning and the end of your shot. Start thinking of it in terms of making the adjustment to the timing as being the way you start a shot, and spacing as the way you finish a shot. As you track an arc, for instance, you know exactly where that arc is supposed to be. That is spacing, okay? And it's even more about spacing if you have an arc, but you want to have a slow out and a slow in at the beginning of and the end of that arc, for instance. Like we kind of took a look in the chest of Groggy as he does that bouncing move, right? So all of that is still with the understanding, still with operating under the assumption that as you're turning one wheel, you're turning the other, and motion is being created. Okay, so never forget that you're making in making motion, you are always changing time and changing position. Okay, and then a workflow change that might be fun for you to try is to let really early on spacing choices dictate a lot that goes on in the scene. This may be something that really gives your animation a boost. I don't know. It might not for everybody, but it's always worthwhile. Workflow practice is always worthwhile. Okay? And the way we did that was we nailed down a timing choice really early on. Normally we have to wait to the end of a shot or the end of the life of a shot so that there are a lot of timing choices that are nailed down and spacing is the only issue, right? Well, if you can, okay, well, 2 frames is the perfect amount to go from the middle of the throw to the end of the throw, right? Or something like that. If you know that, then what you can do is you can say, okay, I've got a timing choice nailed down. Let me space this. And not only let me space this, let me let the thing that I want to be the most impactful, which is the speed of that ball, for instance, really dictate the pose choices that I'm making. Let me space the rest of the body, okay? And I think that shot that I was working on could be added to and worked into a pretty nice throw. I would want to retime some things, of course, but I would also know that as I'm going into the later parts of the shot that I'm using spacing to make those changes, okay? And that's really what super spacing is. Super spacing is knowing the mode you are in, okay? Knowing how you can make a fast in without adjusting the timing, just adjusting the spacing, and the other way around, all right? The more practice you have, the better you'll get at that, and that's why it's so important. It's essential to get a lot of work done, not a 11-second club shot if you're just starting out or if you're even in the middle of your learning. It's a real killer in terms of workflow practice. Just do like 11 seconds of animation, and all of it is like maybe 5 2.5-second tests, right? Maybe 5 48 to 72 frame, just tiny little things. Okay, how many frames was I on? 24. See, I hadn't even finished this, and it was 24. Maybe you could do it a 48 frame, but start him in his ready pose, and then have him lift his leg and then throw. That'd be a perfect test to do. Okay. And if you have a hard drive, filled with like 50 of those things, you can fill up a demo reel like that, send it out. You'll get a look from at least a game company that's interested in you. Oh my gosh, because you look so prolific and so consistent. It's fantastic. Okay. And that's another thing. I know I'm kind of going into a demo reel guide now, but I think it's worth mentioning. The amount of work that you have on your reel I've seen and you've heard stories of people getting hired like at Pixar with a 30-second reel, just like 3 11-second club shots or whatever, just like 3 dialogue tests. And if they're perfect, if they're gorgeous, yeah, they're going to get brought on. I can't remember the guy's name, but the person who did the wine tasting, that is it iAnimate? I think it's iAnimate. Person that did the iAnimate shot wine tasting, yeah, if they're not hired if not working somewhere already, they have a job. I guarantee you, they have a job now. But you don't have to go that route. That was like a 20-second sequence, one shot. My God, it's a monument to animation, that shot. You don't have to go that route. You can. There are. I don't know if you consider it cheating, but there are extremely easier ways to get into a studio, right? And it involves a lot smaller work. Anyway, so that I really want you to do smaller work, really, so you can come back to this issue that we talked about with spacing, and so that you can get a lot of practice realizing that you're in spacing, but also using those kinds of cues to let that relationship between timing and spacing not be so ambiguous and confusing, but so that as you're turning the spacing cog, that the timing is being affected as well, and that's okay, and that's how you make the fine-tune adjustments to things like physical work, slow in, slow out, and arcs, especially arcs on the end of the life of your shot. Okay. This has been a lot of fun. I'll give you the MIA files so you can open them up and check them out yourself. And please suggest more lectures. In my video mails, I'm asking at the end of the year for you to send in asking mail questions. But it's also really nice to get suggestions for lectures. I want to know what you guys are dealing with. I want to know what you want to know. And so you can send those in the resource wish list. Gosh, I get tongue-tied every single time I try to say that. Resource wish list. Oh, God, I tried even harder that time. I got worse. Resource wish list. Try to say it 5 times fast. I won't feel so bad. And that's in the forums. And just suggest what you want to see. And I look through that often and see what I can do about it. Okay. Thanks a lot. Last lecture of the year. It's been a great 2012. There's a lot more coming in 2013. Look around on the site. Tell your friends. Good luck with your animation. And as always, rock on.